Oh, there's Peter. Good evening, Peter.
Sorry, good evening, June. Sorry, I was just on the. I was just looking at my I was looking at my papers and I realised I was on mute, so I was like, "Oh, better get back, better get back." I thought I'd best check what we best read the papers and see what we're showing you.
In front of me, you see. So.
Yeah.
Well, right. Good evening, everybody. Can I confirm the recording of this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee has started?
It started.
Thank you very much. Can I welcome you all to the virtual meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this evening, Thursday, 28th of January. For those who don't know me, my name is Councillor John Walker, and I am the chair of this committee. Councillor Roy Lees is the vice chair. Please note this is a Teams meeting. It has been recorded and the video stream will also be uploaded to YouTube after the meeting. For each item, I will invite members to use the raised hands function on your iPad to make any comments to ensure each member has the opportunity to speak and that they are not speaking over each other. When speaking, please reference the paragraph number to enable everybody to follow you. Please mute your microphone and video feed when you are not speaking. If the technology fails, then I will adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issues, or if this is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. Please, therefore, can I ask all members to confirm that they can hear and speak before the meeting, and I will call out each member to see if they're present. Councillor Roy Lees.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Gabbard.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Hargreaves.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hasina Khan.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Marianne Lowe.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Matthew Lynch.
Present, Chair.
Councillor June Molyneux.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Councillor Steve Murphy. No. No. Councillor Deborah Platt.
I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gillian Sharples.
Hello, Chair.
Hello. Councillor Paul Sloan.
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Kim Snape.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Can I also welcome Mr. Roy Bennett, who's going to speak about the adoption item on the agenda, and Councillor Margaret Franz, who's going to speak about health scrutiny at Lancashire County Council, and Councillor Peter Wilson is going to speak on the budget. So it would appear with no apologies. So we can go on to the minutes. Is that correct, Matthew?
Sorry. There's an apology from Councillor Hilton.
All right, my apology. Yes, that's correct. He did email me last week, in actual fact. So we can go on to the agenda now.
Chair, I don't know whether you need to know that Julie is attending also here on a subject, just so she's noted.
Good evening, Julia.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Right. Minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, the 1st of October of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Is that a true record of what, if you can cast your mind back to before lockdown in October?
Move those, Chair.
Thank you. And have you got any comments to make about those minutes? No, thank you. Can we go on to declaration of any interest? Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. Okay, thank you. Question 3, public questions. Any public questions? No. Okay, we'll go on to the minutes then of item 4 of the performance panel to consider the Overview and Scrutiny performance minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October and 19th of November. Anybody will propose those?
Happy to move those, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any comments about the minutes of those two meetings? Thank you. All right, we're going to agenda item 5. Executive Cabinet minutes to consider the Executive Cabinet minutes of the meetings held on the 15th of October, 12th of November and 10th of December. I know they've all been through the council meeting. I think they agreed on Tuesday evening. So unless anybody's got any comments or anything to bring up about those 3 cabinet meetings, we can move on to item 6, and that's about the notice of executive decisions. To view the latest notice of executive decisions, which you can see on that link. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to have a look at them, but if anybody's got any comments to make, some of the decisions that have been made or are to be made in the future, please let Matthew know or myself know, and we can look into more detail at the next meeting or at some other time if anybody's got some issues about the decision to be made by executive cabinet members in the next few weeks.
They've been very busy, Chair.
I know they have. I know they've been busy. So if nobody's got any comments to make about the future or decisions that are being made by the cabinet members, then we can move on to item 7. And can I welcome again Mr. Ray Bennett, who's going to talk about an update on adoptions and answer any questions. Mr. Bennett, are you with us?
Good evening, Chair. Yes, I am indeed. Thank you very much for the invite, by the way. It's a pleasure to come and speak to you about highway adoption. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak about adoption. Hopefully you'll find this a little bit more interesting than boring. In order to set the scene, my name's Ray Bennett. I'm a Principal Officer in the Highway Service at Lancashire County Council. And I manage the team that looks after adopting highways, answering planning application, consultations and off-site highway works related to planning applications. So can I just do a quick test to see that everybody can see the presentation that I'm going to do this evening? Let's see if this works. Hopefully it does. Can everybody see that?
No.
Not yet.
No.
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 That's not very
No.
right. Okay. Just try again.
Right. If you can't get the presentation up, if you want to speak about the presentation, and then let us have, or let Matthew, our clerk, know, or give him the presentation slides, and they can let them have us at a later date.
I was just going to say, Chair, sorry, it's Ruth. Oh, it looks like he's dropped off the call. I was just going to say, if he could email them to Matthew, then Matthew could email them round to the members, but it looks like he's dropped off. Maybe just give him a minute to rejoin.
How are we doing, Ray? Has he gone?
Hi, Ray.
Hello, sorry about that. I got kicked out. Right.
I was just going to say, if you are struggling to share your screen, you could always perhaps email them to Matthew.
Yeah.
Matthew could email them round to the members, maybe. Thanks.
I'll just try one more time, and if it doesn't work, I'll email Matthew the presentation. I can always go through the verbal stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously, I prefer to do the presentation. Just let me try once again. Okay, sorry, it doesn't appear like it's going to work for me, I'm afraid.
Ray, if you're on kind of the system and able to send that presentation relatively quickly to Matthew, while you kind of do an introduction and stuff, me, Ruth, and Matthew will kind of sort out in the background and see if we can get it shared in the time that you're doing your introduction, just to keep things moving forward. Would be my suggestion.
I'll do that. Just bear with me a second. I'll just email it now. Okay, can everybody hear me still?
Yes, still here.
Yes.
My screen's gone completely blank and everything's died on me, so I'm glad people can hear me. Right, I'll just carry on with the presentation. Okay. So what is a highway? A highway is a road or a street which may include a carriageway, a pedestrian or cycle route, or even a verge, over which the public has the right to pass and repass without hindrance or obstruction. So when we talk about adoption, what do we mean by adoption? Adoption is often mistaken for meaning a thing relating to who is responsible for maintaining a highway. This isn't strictly accurate. Adoption is a process, a procedure, or a mechanism where the highway authority agrees to take on a street or streets and maintain them at public expense for all eternity in reality. This is ultimately managed and maintained by the County Council as the Highway Authority in Lancashire. So I'd like to just do a little bit about the background for the highways and where adoption came from, briefly. Originally, many hundred years ago, roads came into being without regard for maintenance. Then in Tudor times, individuals were appointed as parish overseers of the highways to look after the roads of their parish. However, around the 1700s, the Industrial Revolution began. People wanted to move all manner of items both locally and around the country. Transport construction boomed, and this period resulted in an explosion of road building. Not surprisingly, this created a massive financial burden on the parishes who effectively maintained the highways at the time. A little later on, the government realised this was happening and put measures in place through the Highways Act of 1835. That limited the maintenance burden only to streets that had benefit to the travelling public. We now refer to that as suitable public utility. So this statute indicated that no street would become maintainable at public expense without evidence in writing that the local highway authority had accepted liability. It was introduced to protect unreasonable burden on the public expense. So hence we ended up with adopted highways and private streets. This in turn led to the birth process of what we now call adoption. Today, Lancashire County Council determines suitable public utility as being a street which connects to an existing highway maintained at public expense. I did have an example showing Cypress Close at Clayton Woods, but unfortunately it's not worked, unfortunately. But anyhow, it has to serve at least 6 separate residential properties. Details about how we determine what can be adopted is defined in our document, which is entitled Code of Practice on Highway Status and Adoption. It's a very technical and jargon heavy document, and I wouldn't recommend anyone particularly look at it, but there are other documents that I'll recommend further on in the presentation. So what is the adoption mechanism? For all intent and purpose, Section 38 of the Highways Act, 1980, not 1835, is the main mechanism for new highways to become adoptable and subsequently maintained at public expense. Section 38, sorry, I just realised I got my video on. Section 38 is an agreement between parties involved. The landowner has to agree to dedicate the land for adoption. The highway authority has to agree to take the land and subsequently maintain it. It's important to know that the highway authority cannot force a developer to enter into an agreement for streets on his private land to be adopted. Likewise, a developer cannot force the highway authority to adopt a road system through Section 38. There is exception to this, and I will talk about that a little later on. So how does the mechanism work? A developer approaches the County Council indicating he wishes his development roads, footways and associated infrastructure, for example, street lighting, road gullies, retaining walls, etc., to be adopted. This should be this should be before construction starts. Ultimately, it usually isn't. It's usually after construction starts. But we really require it before it happens so we know what we're looking at for adoption. So, what do we need when we're entering into an agreement? First off, we need to know that there's evidence of an extant existing planning permission. We need to understand that the landowner is the same person that's offering the highway for adoption. And sometimes developers construct on land that they don't have full title to. We need provision of technical information detailing the highway layout and the construction is compliant with the County Council's design standards. This includes street lighting, structures, highway drainage and so on. Evidence that the highway drainage will be connected to adopted surface water outfall, usually being an adopted United Utility Sewerage system, but it can also be a SUD system, a sustainable earned drainage system. Evidence that any required easements have been secured, for instance, so we can access a retaining wall for maintenance or a SUD scheme. Provision of an inspection fee for construction of the works, so we go out and inspect the highway as it's constructed. Rather, so I should say street rather than the highway, and a provision of a bond to secure completion of all highway work should the developer default in its delivery. As part of the process, the Highway Authority will provide details of the information we need for adoption, such as technical requirements, documentation requirements, documentation format, and so on. Technical approval of design and layout, including feedback on how to remedy any identified issues. And we also provide legal advice and draft the Section 38 agreement. In addition, we will undertake site inspections at various stages of construction, assuming we've been paid our supervision fees, and provide certification leading to the final adoption of highway as maintainable public expense. So, how long does it take? Really, there's not a set time period for entering into an agreement. Sometimes the developer is unwilling or simply unable to meet with the requirements for adoption, and an agreement is never entered into. For sites where we do enter into an agreement, generally, typically, we'll adopt somewhere around 24 months after completion of the site works. The usual process is once most of the works are completed, we'll do a final inspection and put the highway to be adopted on the 12-month maintenance period, after which time any remaining defects, once they're remedied, we adopt. Clearly, large complex sites which have multiple phases generally will take a significant time longer before we get to adoption. Okay, so as we all know, sometimes adoptions don't happen, sometimes they take a long time. So what are the barriers to adoption? There are a number of barriers which can prevent an agreement from moving forward in a timely manner. In reality, these can include the design, layout of construction not complying with the County Council's design standards for adoption. Sometimes the developer can't produce full title on the land. They don't own all the land. All landowners are required to be in agreement for the highway to become maintainable public expense. We don't adopt areas of land that don't have an obvious landowner because it's private land. Sometimes the technical details required to enter into Section 38 agreement are not provided. This can include information on road construction, retaining wall design, highway drainage design details, and so on. Another issue that we do not receive confirmation that linked agreements could be entered into. So, for instance, examples of if we haven't got agreements on easements to go and maintain SUD schemes or retaining walls and such. Other barriers can include non-payment of the inspection fee. Sometimes the legal documentation details of the bond and signed agreements may not be returned back by the developer's solicitor in a timely fashion. Sometimes we get developments where service verges are obstructed or planted over, so by impact on access to statutory undertakers' apparatus. Or sometimes the developer's site does not link to highway maintenance or public expense. So an example is that where we've got a development site that's adjacent to another development site that doesn't have a Section 38 agreement on it. So in effect, it's connected to a private bit of street. So we've talked about Section 38. What other legislation is associated with adoption? If we go one down, there's Section 37. Then in Section 37, again of the Highways Act, enables owners of a road to serve notice on the Highway Authority to declare their intention to dedicate the street as a highway. There is no difference in reality between the Section 37 and the Section 38 in terms of what information the County Council require for it to be adopted. The problem with Section 37 is there are many stages to go through, and it is has a potential to be referred to the Magistrates Court, and there are several, more than several, a number of risks about adoption failing through that sub-process. Consequently, it's not utilised in Lancashire for highway adoption. Although extremely rare, there have been attempts by developers to force inappropriate development onto the County Council through Section 37. These have been ultimately rejected through the Magistrates Court. Another part of the Highways Act, Section 228, empowers the Highway Authority to adopt a private street by execution of street works. And this is again an exemption for 38. This is often referred to as a private street works code. In effect, a street can be adopted by notice. Section 228 is, however, a particularly aggressive form of legislation that basically removes land ownership rights and forces landowners to pay for streets to be made up to an adoptable standard. Because of the draconian nature of the powers, they are very rarely used. On the rare occasions that they are used, they need to meet the following criteria: that all frontages wish for the road to be adopted, that all frontages understand and are committed to funding the required construction and legal costs, that those seeking adoption hold legal title, again land ownership, the private street links directly to an adopted highway or highway maintainable at public expense, the private street complies or can be made to comply with adoptable layout and construction standards, and the private street serves at least 6 residential dwellings. Sometimes a developer will ask the Highway Authority to utilise Section 228 when they do not have full title. As previously highlighted, we would only consider this as very exceptional circumstances and where the developer has first undertaken extensive and exhaustive research into land ownership. So I apologise, I know it's very, very technically heavy, and the presentation that went with it would have split it up with some humorous pictures, but we are where we are, so I apologise for that. But basically, there's a piece of work that's been done by the Department for Transport, and it's essential reading. It's called the Advice Note on Highway Adoption, and rather than being full of technical jargon, it's very user friendly, and it's something that can be looked at by absolutely everybody. It's relevant to absolutely everybody. So on that note, I've finished. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions anybody has.
If anyone's got any questions, if you right to raise the hand. Yes, I can't see who that is. Who is it, please?
Is it Councillor Kim Snopes raised? Yeah, Kim's raised hand.
Yeah. Kim, that's your question, please.
Yeah, it's just a quick question. I just wondered, when estates are adopted in Lancashire, is there a process for the county council updating the online mapping system? Because I've had quite a few examples over the last 5 or 6 years where estates get adopted, and then when customers phone the contact centre, when the customer advisors are looking at online, they're telling them it's not adopted. I just wondered, do the two marry up at any point? Thank you.
Good evening, Councillor. Yes, they do. As soon as a highway is adopted, the information is passed through to our asset team, who maintain the asset and the records. The information should be uploaded onto the system. Now, you're not the only person that's come across that particular issue. I think one of the other members of the committee tonight emailed me this afternoon about something similar. At the moment, we're going through a transformation process with regards to IT, and there may be something to do with that at the moment. But yes, in reality, the information should be updated. Yes.
Brilliant. No worries. I'll just flag the examples when they come up.
Yeah, no, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
You're completely right as well, because I've come across items where bits of road aren't shown as adopted on our system, and for whatever reason, unfortunately, just falling through the cracks. But yes, there is a mechanism in place where once an adoption takes place, that information is then uploaded on the system through our asset team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? I've got one, Ray. A few years ago, a development was built, but as the development was being finished, the builder went bust, and of course the estate never got adopted. There was all sorts of problems. What is there anything happen now in case that scenario happens again?
Do you know, Councillor Walker, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
And there is an answer, and unfortunately it's not progressing as well as we like. In the Highways Act, there is provision under section 220 of the Act to ensure that bond money are taken off developers before they start constructing. But unfortunately that part of the highways legislation is broken because it relies upon building regs approval being informed to the Highway Authority within 1 week of it taking place, and the Highway Authority serving notice within 6 weeks of it taking place. The problem is that many years ago, how building regulations took place was totally altered and taken out of the hands of the district authorities. So now the Highway Authority isn't informed, so we can't serve notice. So that mechanism in the past would have protected people in the scenario I've just said, because there would have been a bond in place for the county council to come along and make up the roads and the streets. Now then, central government and the Department for Transport are totally aware of the issue. They're totally aware that that part of the Highways Act is broken, and they intend to move forward and try to do something that will rectify that issue and stop what you just described happening in the future. Unfortunately, it's not progressed as fast as we would have liked because Brexit has taken precedence, and I would assume that the current pandemic would have also impacted on how we are able to, at central government level, look at legislation. So yeah, it is aware. The county council, highway authorities across the land totally understand what you're saying, and previously there was provision to make sure it didn't happen. That provision is broken, and the central government know it's broken and are looking to try and put something in place that remedies that issue. Does that explain it?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else got any questions?
Councillor Roy
Councillor
Lees has got his hand.
indicated, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that is basically one of the biggest problems in my ward, that I've got an estate consisting of about 600-700 houses, which has been built by a number of different contractors, and there is only one little ring road, like a bus route within it, with all the little streets off it, and the one route is been adopted, but all the rest of it hasn't. And we keep getting complaints from the residents saying the lights have gone, we want it adopted, we want grit bins, but because it's not been adopted, I can't get anything done. And this estate has been built for quite a number of years now, and it's been completed. You know, where would you recommend to go to sort those problems out?
Well, obviously I don't know what the reason is behind the estates not being adopted. I went through probably a whirlwind tour of the potential pitfalls of why things don't get adopted. All I can say is residents need to keep approaching the individual developers to get an update, because ultimately the road system and that estate remains privately maintained. And like I said in the presentation, the developers have to come to us. They have to offer the adoption. We can't adopt streets. And to be fair, like I went about the history of things, the public person's only got so much money to maintain streets and roads. And that's what is utilised for highway maintenance. We don't have money to make up private streets to adoptable standards and to fix all the issues and repair all the problems. So yeah, it's a difficult position. Totally appreciate that. But all I can suggest is residents keep trying to get in touch with the individual developers and get them to push on for adoption and see what they say.
Yeah, but even when I approach the developers, I don't get a response from them. They just seem to fob me off and nothing gets done.
Yeah, I appreciate that position. But there's not a lot we can do other than that, I'm afraid.
It's the residents who are suffering. Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions? I can't see any more raised hands. Oh, yes, one now. Who is that? It never shows on the bottom here who it is.
Councillor Berry.
Councillor Berry. Thank you, Councillor Berry.
Hello, thanks for the presentation tonight, Ray. It's really welcome, and thanks for sorting out a tricky issue this afternoon in one of my district wards.
Sorry, Councillor Barry, I'm just having trouble hearing you. A little bit quiet.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm turning me sound up, see if I can boost you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just thanking you for your help today and on hopefully in the future. My concern is that we just seem to not communicate very well, and I had to almost like act like a spy to discover who you were today to enable me to progress a problem I had, which was just a basic problem about information just not being in place really to support a resident. And I just, the district council does its best to really work really well with the department over adoptions, but the thing is they've sort of missed the councillors out of the loop. And I was wondered whether GDPR is the reason. Is it because when I've inquired about adoptions, I've been sent a letter from the chief exec's office basically saying you can't know the detail, it's sensitive, it's about developers and they've got to have privacy. And our biggest difficulty is that when things go on for such a long length of time, especially when developers go into administration or the land developers changes hands, that the customers let down the most because they don't have that point of contact where they can approach people and say, I need a light fixing, I need the road fixing. And it's that frustration that residents have that I'm most concerned about, because ultimately they blame the council. They say, what a useless council you are, whether it's the county council or Chudley Council. And actually, sometimes it's the developer's responsibility to keep in touch and communicate. So just how can we resolve this? Because we have numerous ones just in my county division, never mind in my district division. So I think I've said enough. See what you say about that. Thank you.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because residents are purchasing a house and they're purchasing a house on an estate that's private. So it isn't adopted by the Highway Authority. The Highway Authority have a policy of adopting residential developments of 6 units or over, but clearly the units, the construction of the highway, the layout has to comply with adoption standards, because the public purse can't be expected to make up roads to adoptable standard. So I think one of the first instances is that the residents should be aware they're buying a house on a private road. It's part of the conveyancing system, so the solicitors should be telling them that. So first off, I don't know if there's a communication issue right at the beginning of the house purchasing process. Now then, what generally happens is that we do look to adopt, and we do try and adopt the highways of new residential dwellings, new residential estates, but there's only so much we can do. It's very much in the hands of the developers. The developers have to come along and show that it's constructed to adoptable standard and that they've got the sewage and drainage systems connected to United Utilities apparatus and so on. So we don't have the staff capacity or the people in terms of numbers to be actually actively try and engage with developers. It's very much the onus is on the developers to come to us. Now then, with regards to communication, as far as I'm aware, when people contact us, we do tell them and explain the position. I'm not sure there is any kind of gap in regards to communication. And the same with members. We have a district lead team that's specially set up to deal with member inquiries, ranging all the way from parish all the way up to the MP. So I think the communication channels are there. But I understand what you're saying about frustration of residents. I completely get that. So it is a difficult situation, and it is what it is. Unfortunately, the legislation that helped us with regards retaining money to be able to make up adoption that's fallen by the wayside, that is it's just broken. And like I was explaining earlier to Chair, that central government is looking at that. They totally understand it's broken. They're trying to come up with some new legislation to resolve it. But unfortunately, due to current events, it's taken a bit of a back burner. So does that answer your question?
It does, but basically, if I just refer to the Seddon estate, which we dealt with today, I wrote to Cabinet Member Keith Idden and he gave me a reply. We got a sincere apology from the department for not responding in a reasonable time, and told me they'd keep me informed. But then 15 days later, you adopt Seddon estate, but you don't tell the councillor, or probably the local authority might not even know.
Yeah.
So there are examples, and I'm really pleased that we've got someone like yourself who we can identify with, we can call on to address some of these issues. And I'm just having a named person will help us bridge these gaps and sort things out. So I do appreciate it.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I'm sorry that's happened to you, councillor. It's unfortunate. It shouldn't happen. If you're asked to be kept informed, and we've said we've kept you informed, then that should happen. Yeah. But what I would suggest is we've got a district, like I said, we've got a district lead team that's set up for each district as a contact point. They pull information in from all the highway services, be that the planning application side, adoptions, highway maintenance, whatever, construction work. They'll pull all the data and information in. So they're the point of contact for all your highway queries, if you will. And I can certainly pass the details on to Matthew to make sure that that's distributed amongst members, if that helps.
Yeah, well, to be honest, that doesn't, because in practice, we keep being sent emails to tell us to stop emailing them, and that we should go through the reporting system like everybody else does. And that's a regular occurrence. And I think, County Councillor and District Councillor Kinsnake's on the call tonight, and I think she'll agree with me that this is what happens. It's communication still is an issue, regrettably.
Well, I'll take that and bring it, take that back and bring it up with our district lead contacts, because really they're supposed to be the people that you have the direct line to, they can then contact the individual officers that may be dealing with the problem you're talking about. So I'll feed that back if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Roy, you've still got your hand up. Are you okay with it?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ray. You mentioned earlier on that the builder may not necessarily be the landowner, but it would be the landowner who is responsible for the roads once built. Is that correct?
Yeah, might be a little bit misleading to say the builder might not be the landowner. Generally, what happens is the developer will own the majority of the land, but there'll be a small section of land that they build a road over that they don't have title to, and that can prevent adoption because you can't offer something you don't own. That makes sense to you?
Yeah. No, I was just thinking that obviously it's people who are buy the property leasehold. The person who owns the lease of the land may not be the builder, but would the leaseholder of the land own the road as such, or?
Well, you get into complicated land ownership details. I'm probably not the right person to ask that, but generally the developer has title to the land that the roads are built on and the footways, because if they didn't, they couldn't offer it for adoption. But we do get these issues. There's one in Adlington that one of your members will know about. That is a small section of the highway that they're trying to offer for adoption that they don't have title to. So in effect, it's not their land to offer.
Right.
So that's a barrier, because it's the county council can't come along and adopt something that you don't actually own. It's like, if we could just go and adopt next door neighbour's driveway and all sorts. It doesn't quite work like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, can I thank you, Ray, for the presentation this evening? I'm certain we've learned a lot more about adopting the roads and estates, and I'm certain with your name now being in the forefront we'll be on to you if we have any further problems in the near future. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Jerry, once again. I'm sorry the presentation itself didn't work, but thank you for allowing me to come and talk about it.
Yeah, I'm certain if Matthew's got them, he will email them to us over the next few days anyway.
Yeah,
so
I'll pass it on to Matthew. For some reason, my system froze up, but I will make sure Matthew gets the presentation and the script as well.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. If you want to stop for the rest of the evening, you can do. If not, thank you very much and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Night. Okay. We'll go back to thank you for that. We'll now go on to item 8, which is the budget scrutiny. And can I welcome Chris Sinnott, our finance director? If he deputy director of finance.
I was going to say I wouldn't call me any sort of finance person because I was pretty poor at mental arithmetic through the. So I am standing in for our finance colleagues, but
Right.
Councillor Wilson is on the call.
Oh, I know he is. I know he is. So I think he's going to do the presentation anyway. So if you can hand over to Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Thanks, John. Just thank members for inviting me as usual to do the budget consultation, go through the budget papers and what we're going to consult with the public on. As usual, Chair, as you'd expect, the financial situation is challenging. I don't think I need to go through a history of it. We can just stick to the papers we've got in front of us. Basically, Chair, we'll see if I turn members' attention just to start with the start of the report. Outlines the council's funding, so it's always useful just to remind ourselves of where we actually get our money from and what actually comes into the council. And you'll see there that separate areas such as business rates, council tax, new homes bonus and the grants, and it's quite easily highlighted on page 86 in the bar chart there, which shows what elements we get from each of those areas that I've just highlighted and the overall level of funding. You can see the change even since 2016 through to this current year 2021, and then obviously moving forward for the next 3 years, because that's our challenge now, is to set the not just the budget for this year but to actually plan in the medium term how we make sure we balance the books. So that sets out the basic picture. It does make reference there in the report to two things. One is the uncertainty around business rates, and linked to that is the fair funding review. So both those actually, if I remember rightly, Chair, I remember attending a meeting in 2018 about the fair funding review and business rates while the review was ongoing, and unfortunately it's still the case. We don't have any certainty around that. So of course that does create some difficulty when trying to set the budget for the future. So if I could just take you then to page 89, paragraph 26, we got a nice heading there, which is budget deficit, and the table there at table 1 shows the position that we're currently in. So that makes it very clear that this year's deficit stands at £908,000. You can see that it was 302, but obviously we've had the leisure services cost thrown in, because of course we had to take over the leisure services in again response to the COVID situation. So that deficit rather has increased. So as I say, 908,000 for this year, 3.2 million for the year after, and then rising to 4.3. Just to be clear, Chair, that's the total figure. That's not an additional 3 million and an additional 4.3. That's the cumulative total over the 3 years. If we then just go down to the following page 90, what that highlights, and this is where we begin, as it says in the yellow banner there, to balance the budget. And how do we do that? So the first starter is to take into account the savings that we're going to make, or we have made rather, and going to make from shared services, which are significant savings. And obviously that's part of the reason why we entered into the shared services arrangements. And in addition to the savings is income generation from our assets. So that's the Market Walk extension, Primrose, Strawberry Fields and Logistics House, which you can see there again, significant sums coming into the council each year. So that then reduces our deficit quite significantly to 170,000 for this year, going up to 2 million and then 2.9 million the year after. And I'll just, if you don't mind, Chair, just while we're on the theme of deficits and how to bridge the gap, we'll go to page 95, if I may, which the table there then sets out how do we bridge the remainder of that deficit. And you can see there that we've included 3 areas of additional income, which is the council tax increase, which is proposed at 2%, or 1.99% to be precise, parking income, which we discussed before about changing the parking charges, but obviously making sure we don't have an adverse impact on the town centre, and investment sites. And again, we've looked at that in terms of the council's strategy for the future to actually increase revenue from our sites. Combine that then with further savings that have been identified, which are quite significant and challenging numbers. You'll see there when it says future savings, particularly looking at £1 million for 2022-23 and going up to 1.3 million for the year after. That can be achieved, we think, without obviously jeopardising the delivery of services, and that then balances the budget, Chair. So that's a very brief overview of how we intend to bridge that gap of almost £1 million this year, going up to 3 million the year after, and almost 4 million the year after that. What that allows us to then do, just to, I'm sorry, because I'm making you flip through the report slightly, but what that allows us to do then is meet the council's investment priorities. So if we go to the nice colourful chart in between pages 90, so it's page 92 and 93. And if you turn to page 93, investment, which is heading investment priorities 21-22, that sets out where the council is seeking to invest. And this is building on the work that we've already done. And it's actually then extending it into areas that we believe the council wants us to spend wants us to invest council taxpayers' money, as it were, and also spend our time and energies on delivering services. So it's 1.7 million on the revenue investments, which includes things such as the town centre work on the bingo hall, the money for the bus station. It includes the £100,000 to support future planning applications and allow us to defend locally made decisions. We had a brief debate, Chair, which I know you contributed to on Tuesday, about planning and the development, but irrespective of the history and irrespective of how we've got where we are, we all know now we're facing a position where we have got a number of, let's say, developments which we think would be detrimental to the area, and we need to be able to defend those. So it's important we put our money to then defend those, and that can be anywhere. Obviously in the borough we've already seen a number of applications come in, particularly in the rural areas. In addition, Chair, we continue with things such as the investments in the youth zone, CCTV, mentions there Clayton Lewis Parish Building, mentions the work for the voluntary and community sector. So they're all investments that we make. And then we've got the big ticket items on the right hand side, which make up the £30 million in capital investments, whether that's the Whittle Health Hub, something I know that you're obviously being always keen to support, Chair, our commitment to housing and to provide our own affordable housing stock, the green agenda. Again, we recently set up we established the working group on Tuesday night. That's actually to make sure we deliver with the money behind it of £500,000. The Tatton scheme now £15 million, which will provide new GP centre, new community centre, pharmacy and supported living. And then the Olca Lane project, which is a significant employment site for us that we hope to bring forward. So all in all, Chair, I'd say that it's a challenge to balance the books, and it is a challenge to deal with the uncertainty over funding streams, but I think we've done it. And I think that's testament to a lot of hard work by a lot of people. And in addition to that, that's allowed us to focus on the priorities of this council that were set out in the corporate plan, and also the priorities that we've identified, some of which, these things about the future of planning, the future of school provision, etc. We've debated in the past at council. We've all got our own views on it, but we are making sure we're putting money towards those things. So all in all, Chair, I think the plan is a good puts us in a good position. It makes sure we balance the books, but more importantly, it allows us to continue to invest. At the same time, and I'll finish on this point, Chair, if we go to page 98, you can see the position in terms of our reserves. So the general fund is still, we keep the £4 million, which is what we committed to a number of years ago now. And in addition to that, we've got another £3.2 million there in other reserves, which are whether that's covering the market walk, equalisation reserve, or for our asset maintenance, or for support for local businesses. We've got monies in those pots, which we've deliberately set aside over the years, so that we are trying to be as sensible and reduce the level of risk of any of our investments by making sure we've got ample reserves to plug gaps as and when we need it. No more so has that been proved this year, Chair, with the whole COVID situation, where we've had to make a number of decisions and a number of changes to what we normally do. So on that, Chair, I will stop there. I think that's hopefully given an overview of what we're proposing and what we intend to consult on. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anybody got any questions? I've got one or two, or comments more than probably questions. If nobody's got any questions, I'll go back to the papers now and then ask the question if you don't mind. It is a difficult time, and I appreciate the trying to get to the budget or sort the budget out is very difficult. I'm not there yet. Just hang on. Right, I'm back. I'm back now. I mean, with the COVID-19, it has caused great problems to all concerned, not only in the public sector but in the private sector. And I got to say, well done to the staff who come up and got this budget as it is now. Can I just ask, what is the amount of money that you do get for the government finance settlement? Is it $500,000? $750,000? Is there any figure you're going to get yet?
Well, for the settlement for this year, sorry, Chair.
Hello. Yeah, I'm with you.
Sorry, do you mean the settlement this year in terms of what our funding is?
Yes. Have you had any indication from the government what the settlement is?
Yeah, as far as I know, I'm just checking, Chair. As far as I know, and I'm just going back over the report just so I make sure I give you the correct information. Just trying to find it. Chair, bear with me.
If I can help slightly, one place to be able to see it is in the graph that says major sources of council funding, which what we have had in terms of, so we get the settlement just before Christmas. I think it actually was a few days earlier this year. It wasn't actually Christmas Eve, but we only get a 1-year settlement because the fair funding review hasn't been completed as Councillor Wilson set out. We are only certain about the government funding that we will and the provisions that we'll get for the coming financial year, so 2021-22. So in the graph, the third bar in from the right has the money, and it's included in the tables and in the text, but this is just an easy place to look at it. The money that we will get from the government is broadly only really the lower tier services grant allocation, which is around about £500,000. That's a one-off funding allocation that the government's made available to us. The other parts of the settlement that the government take into account are our council tax levels, where they make assumptions about how much we've put council tax up in the past, and also business rates and our retained business rates, which is close to £5 million. Does that help, Councillor Walker?
Yeah. I mean, I assume then that the what money you've got available this year is approximately the same as last year, because the government has topped up various grants and various compensation for lots of money with council tax, etc. Am I right in assuming that?
It's just slightly less.
Slightly less. Okay. Right. That's okay. I want to go on to the a question about, if I can find it, it's table 1. There we are. You say the leisure centre is going to lose about £600,000 this year. Is that's the estimate? Hasn't there been a grant from the government to compensate leisure centres for being closed down, etc.?
There's a bit gone. Chris has already put his hand up, so go on. He's keen tonight. I'll let him speak.
I'll come back on. People probably correct me, to be honest. The government have currently made a national fund available for a period during this financial year, running from November time, and councils have had to bid into it. I think we're still awaiting the response for Chorley, but it only covers the losses in this financial year, not into future financial years. So it would improve the money that we put aside when the legislative management came in house, if we do get that money.
But it won't affect this £600,000 that you think you'll lose next year then.
No, because that is what we're assuming will happen with leisure centres kind of reopening and hopefully recovering during the next financial year.
Okay, thank you. I want to go on to table 3 if I can find it. Yes, there we are. That's on page 90. Income generated, it's about the total budget, where there's a deficit of £170,000. Strawberry Fields, and it is a bit of a disaster at the moment, isn't it? Because that's losing money hand over fist. Is there any sign that will get better over the next few months?
Perhaps not over the next few months, Chair. It's slightly better because if you recall, the actual deficit as it stands is about 400,000. So of course you can see there it gets better as we move forward in terms of what we predict. But of course that's a prediction, and it's based on the fact that we want to make sure more businesses are coming back. Where you are correct is, given the current situation, obviously that is now not in a. We were hoping to have done better with that, obviously pre-COVID, but like everything. We can't do anything about that. So what we've got to do is try and get it back on track as soon as possible. And you can see there that in the table that we go from saying the £223,000 deficit through to it breaking even, through to it again making money for us. Now, like all these things, Chair, it is a long-term investment. So if that building is there for the next 25, 50 years and beyond, it should still be a good source of revenue for this council, but at the minute, of course, it's not there. But that's what we've got to work at. We've got to work at getting people in there. All I would say is, if there's any indication that we had a lot of interest beforehand, people were liked the venue when they came down. I think although people will be working from home in the future, people still need office space, and there'll still be demand there. So we're hoping it will come back.
Good. Market Walk Extension, you've only got an increase of £50,000 money income generation over the next 2 years. I mean, we've just got Sports Direct gone in there, and all right, I think for the children's area upstairs, the bowling alley, you've given that the rates a holiday until presumably April this year, or when things get back to be opened again. So presumably that amount of money will increase more than £50,000, won't it?
That's possible. I mean, I can't say that definitely won't happen, Councillor Walker, and I hope it does, because I hope actually the remaining units will be let as well, in which case we'll do even better. But we had to factor in two things. One is the fact that, as you say, there's been the relief that we did put through. Was it the last but one council meeting for both Real and for Escape? That's the word, Escape.
Yeah.
So we have to factor that in. That's right, I do. We always have to factor that into the calculation, plus the fact that obviously, as you said, at the minute, the other unit that we're hoping to let isn't actually let, but we're hoping that will go. So that's why the revisions on the income has gone slightly down, but I can still think that's quite strong in its performance. And like I say, you might be right, Councillor Walker. We could be sat here in 2 years' time saying, well, that was actually a lot better than we thought.
Yeah, good. Well, hope so. I've just one more question, really, an observation. It's the investing in corporate policies. Basically, the Conservative Group, we've always supported your current investment programme, but there's never anywhere in any reports about how much money you have borrowed to finance these investments. Now, I just wonder why you never put in the amount of borrowing you've had to make and how you intend to pay back the borrowing.
The borrowing's always included in the budget papers, Councillor Walker. And it's also in the quarter. It's also there where if you look at the reports that go to Cabinet as well, because we have to report it. We can't not report it. Now, this is about a consultation document which says this is where we're invested and this is a deficit we've got. We could go into the nitty-gritty of the reports of borrowing. We could go into the detail of the Treasury Management Strategy, where we invest our funds, where we borrow from. We can go into the whole range of detail, but this is obviously going out to consultation. So perhaps that level of detail isn't something we normally include, but it's always in the budget papers.
Yeah, I don't dispute that, but people read, shall we say, the man on the street reading this will probably wonder why or how you've got hold of £30 million to pay for the building on Buckshaw, and how £15 million to pay for Tatton, etc. And it doesn't show in these figures really, and that's you aren't letting the public really know how much you are borrowing to finance all these projects.
Again, I disagree with that, because it's in the papers, which is in a public meeting, which the public can view. So I don't see that it's not letting them know, because they can see it. But also remember, the money comes from different sources as well. It's not just borrowing. Some of it's from Section 1.
Well,
some
I agree.
Of it's from
Yes, I
still monies.
agree.
And there's a mixture there. But all I'd say is, when it comes to the budget and the level of income that we expect from those schemes, that takes into account the borrowing cost. So that when we talk about the 100,000 or 150,000 from Market Walk Extension, that's after everything's been paid off.
Yes.
So I agree, the technical detail's not there in each element of it as to where sources of funding come. In this report, that is, it is in the budget there, but the numbers that you're seeing are having taken into account the cost of the borrowing.
Yeah. So presumably the investment at Logistics House, £450,000, that is taking into account the cost for the borrowing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as is the Market Walk income. Yeah,
that is the net figure, 450,000.
That's the net.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah, and that is me finished really. No, I will have more to say at the Budget Council meeting later in the year or next month. And thank you for your report here. Has anybody? I see we got hands up. Councillor Hargreaves.
Yeah, Peter, I was just like to ask really, is there a contingency for Strawberry Fields? Is there any thought to actually having sell half of it off and use the other half for digital as a digital house? But is there any way forward? Because it's not making money, and from the point of view, it's on a large site. It's got loads of car parking spaces. It's very attractive, I would have thought, as a business property. So is there any thoughts to look at a contingency like that?
I mean, yes. Potentially, there's everything, Yvonne. I mean, there's nothing ruled out, as it were. But at the minute, Plan A is still Plan A.
Okay.
And there's no reason. And at the minute, there's no reason. We don't believe there's a massive problem there once things get back up and running. But you are right. In theory, you've got to look at all uses of it and potential uses of it. And of course, we'll definitely consider that. But at the minute, we're hoping we're still going to get a number of businesses coming back and expressing interest and taking space.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any further questions? No? Well, can I thank you for your presentation this evening, Councillor Wilson and Chris, and also thank the officers who produced the budget. I mean, it hasn't been an easy task, and it'll be a difficult task next year to keep control of the finances if COVID keeps going as it is at this level, really. So thank them. So thank you for this evening. And if you want to stop here, Councillor Wilson, you can do with pleasure. And also, Chris, if you want to stop. If not, thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going off again, back to the agenda, if you can find it. The next item on the agenda, I think, is the health scrutiny. And thank you, Councillor Franz, for being so patient. And if you'd like to give your report.
Good evening, all. Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, members. So I'm here tonight to report on the Lancashire County Council Health Scrutiny meeting, which took place on Tuesday, the 15th of December. And I have to say to you all that much of this now is really quite old news. So with your permission, I thought I'd give a very quick whiz through that, because you'll be aware of virtually all of this through the news media reports and what have you. And then perhaps if you'll allow me to, I thought I'd quote from the Lancashire Health and Wellbeing meeting which took place last week. So that's got some more up-to-date information that members may wish to hear with your permission. Is that okay?
Fine, yes,
so,
fine.
It seems like a long time now. At mid-December, we were in quite a different situation to what we were in just now. So the large part of the meeting was taken up by the NHS test and trace, and obviously the wider COVID issues. And they took mention of the fact that normally in January and February the highest hospital admission rates due to the winter bed pressures. So there was a discussion about the what strategies have been employed at the hospital to cope with the winter bed pressures. That Lancashire was working with the military to deliver a 6-week targeted surge programme of the asymptomatic lateral flow testing to care and education settings, as well as a faith centre and to large employers. Now, I'm told that surely employers have not really been particularly good to take up this offer, but across the district it may be different. And they've actually applied for another 2-week extension to that 6-week period. So that is ongoing in various parts. But I think the primary schools were not allowed to avail themselves of it. The monitor deemed it inappropriate to be doing this type of testing on small children. I think it tends to be higher education and universities that are using this. Then they talked about contact tracing and the fact that the local contact tracing now data was only passed on to the local tracers after about 3 to 4 days from the national system. So the first 3 or 4 days, if people hadn't been contacted, it was then passed on to local teams, and they were able to reach the vast majority of these people within 48 hours. So you're looking at overall a period of maybe 6 or 7 days before people were contacted. But on the positive side, there's been a reduction in the amount of duplication of telephone calls that people were receiving. I don't know if you've heard of stories about this, that people are being contacted over and over and over, and various different members in the household being contacted over and over, ask the same question. So that seems to have stopped happening. So in terms of the lateral flow testing, it's a bit of an interesting one, really, because whilst it does identify just under half of asymptomatic cases in the community, 50% of those people are still going to be walking around and doing what they normally do. But it's important to know that even though there's such a large number of false positives, in other words, false negatives, only 48.89% of people with asymptomatic COVID-19 will be detected by lateral flow. But if you do get there are lots and lots of false negative reports, but there are not false positive reports. So if you get a report that is positive, it will be positive. Yeah, do you see what I mean? So it is useful in that sense. But those people who do have a positive result are always asked to go and have a swab test for confirmation whilst they self-isolate till they receive the result. So there was comment about at that point the vaccines hadn't been approved, so it was a discussion about the benefits of the Pfizer versus the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and they were expected to be approved in early January 2021. And as we all know, this was up and running just before Christmas, so things have moved on a pace since then. Transmission of the virus in hospital was high, so-called nosocomial infections, in other words, contracting COVID-19 whilst you're an inpatient. And that was something that was raised as a concern. But I can tell you today, after being in the Lancashire Teaching Hospitals Trust Board of Governors meeting this afternoon, that those infection rates are dropping off very nicely now because they've implemented some very effective infection control measures. What was happening was, I think people were being exposed to COVID-19 when they were in a ward that was deemed amber, that had people who had not yet had a test result to say they were negative or positive. But they've made some good alterations to the way they manage that now. So I think that's quite impressive. So as I say, it's really all old news, this. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. But just a quick resume at the Lancashire Health and Wellbeing Board last week, which is more current. These are the figures for weekend in January the 20th. So Chorley's cases for the case finding, the positive testing was 373 per 100,000, which is actually below the national average. And it's slowing down. It had gone down than 1% in the previous 7 days. And it's particularly slowing down in the over 60s age group. The number of the demographics of the people who are testing positive are quite interesting, insofar as the 16 to 19-year-olds and the 30 to 44-year-olds had the highest numbers, where 10% of those tested were showing positive. So I suppose that's a good thing in a way, because the older people, as we know, are the ones who take up more time in the hospital beds and have more complications in general. So there's 100% bed occupancy in critical care unit. The numbers have been escalated twice over. And the peak of hospital admissions has not yet been reached. It is predicted the peak of hospital admissions will be likely in the period between the 3rd of February to the 17th of February. And the peak of deaths, which will follow on from that, is expected round about the 24th of February to the beginning of March. The expectation is that the vaccination programme won't see its benefits really until end of March, even beginning of April. So we have a way to go yet before we're out of this. But I'm glad to say that more than 80% of the over 80s in Lancashire have been vaccinated. There's a bit of an issue about some of the ethnic minorities, where there's a bit of a rumour going around that pork products are used in the production of these vaccines, but some of the voluntary and faith groups are trying to address this and make sure that people are aware this is not true. And there are numbers of enforcements, if you're interested. There were 167 notices of enforcement issued in that week ending the 20th of January across Lancashire, which were, interestingly enough, barbers, gyms, shops, and gatherings of young people mostly. So there's a lot of work taking place. I think in general, Chorley is doing quite well, but I think it's really important that people do stick to the guidelines even after they've had the vaccination. And let's hope when we meet up next time that these figures will be a lot less.
We hope so, yes. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I just say that I've had both my jabs.
Oh, good.
So I won't say I'm immune, but there we are. What I was going to say is, with all the admissions in Preston and Chorley, have other, shall we say, cancer treatment, has all that stopped, or are they still doing operations and things, or have they had to take over wards that usually did that work?
I think to a large extent, routine things have been stood down at the present time. There will be attention given to surgery that is time critical. In other words, things that will deteriorate if they're not dealt with in a timely manner, they will get priority. But things like that are deemed to be routine, that wouldn't really change over the course of time, are stood down really, with the numbers of patients very critically ill at present in the hospitals.
It is a worry though for people who have been diagnosed with cancer and not getting any treatment really. But I suppose you can't treat everybody, can you? There's only a certain amount of admissions you can take in, and so you do have a problem, don't you? Really.
I think the hospitals are very, very stretched at the moment. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Yes, Roy. You want to ask a question?
Yeah. Probably I should know this, but is all the COVID patients being treated at Preston? Are there any at Chorley, or is Chorley?
Yeah, I think they're at both hospital sites, and I think they're also using the Manchester Nightingale Hospital now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Well, thank you. There doesn't seem any more questions, so thank you for that, Margaret. I mean, you've updated us, and that's a good thing. But as you say, we get these details most nights on the television anyway. Don't we? all the doom and gloom on BBC, but there we are. But let's hope in the next few weeks things do get better, and we can get rid of the lockdown, the full lockdown anyway, and get the children back to school, which is the biggest problem, really. You know. But there we are. So thank you anyway. And if you want to continue or stop on, you can do with pleasure. If not, thank you for your attendance this evening and good night.
I wish you all good evening. Good night.
Yes, yeah. Good night. Thank you, Margaret.
Bye, Margaret.
Night, Margaret.
Good night, Margaret.
Okay. I'm not going back on the agenda because the next item is the task group on road transport, etc., etc. And I think, Kim, you're going to present that or give us an update how far you've got with it. So if you can do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, we're coming towards the latter end of the task group now. We've met with a number of organisations and individuals, including transport officers from the County Council, the Cabinet Member, Keith Hidden, Stagecoach, Dial-A-Ride, Northern Trains. We've also spoken with Zoe Whiteside from Chorley Council, just to look at some of the progress that's been made on the Green Agenda recommendations that relate to transport. Some of the members of the task group have also attended a number of online sessions from the LGA around sustainable transport. And we've also been looking at how things are done elsewhere in other parts of the country. So we've spent some time looking at the franchising model that's out. I think it's still out to consultation in Greater Manchester. Over the next couple of weeks, I think it's tomorrow, so we're going to be having a chat with Lindsay Hoyle, the MP, just to get his perspective on some of the issues in Chorley. And I think it's next week we're going to be speaking with Chris Sinnott and Jonathan Node, just to try and round up some of the discussions we've had and get the council's perspective on things that need to change sort of in our area. But all in all, I think generally we've learned quite a lot. I think we've all sort of come to our various different conclusions in terms of some of the issues that need to change, how we can try and influence some of that change, bearing in mind some of that influence is limited, but you know, we can try our best. And then basically we're hoping to put together our recommendations during February. We're aiming for the report to go to Cabinet at some point in March. And thank you to Alison and Matthew for all their work on it as well, because we have covered quite a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. The question I was going to ask is, will this be coming back to the last scrutiny of this municipal year, which is in March, for us to look at it before it goes to Cabinet? You're saying that's the hope or the timescale?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Matthew might be able to tell you the date of the Cabinet meeting. I'm not sure what the date of the Cabinet meeting is, or if it's before or after scrutiny. I can check though.
Okay. In fact, my diary's here. I will have a look myself. The Overview and Scrutiny is on the 18th of March, and the Cabinet's on the 25th.
All right,
so that'll be good. If we can get the report to us for the 18th of March, that would be great. Then we can, if we want to make any adjustments to it, we can do before the Cabinet meets the following week. So that's great. Very good.
That's the so yeah, we're nearly there.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, well done to you and all the members of that committee or group and the officers, because it's not an easy task, and you covered a lot of ground. So well done, well done. So we can now move on to if I can get back to my agenda. Last item on the agenda is the work programme, which I think Matthew has sent it on a separate email, hasn't he? Yes, there we are. Work programme. Yeah, for the there's nothing on the March. Oh, yes, there is. We've got the health groups again, and then we've got the task group. Also, there will be an item which I'm talking to Councillor Lynch will be interested in this. Well, I'm talking to Ben Murray in the next couple of weeks to discuss the neighbourhood groupings before the elections in May, so that we've got some idea of what the groupings will be for the neighbourhoods in the next municipal year. The ones we discussed last year fell by the wayside. But anyway, we didn't have the elections anyway. But I'm hoping that it would appear Councillor Murray has been discussing with the officers and come up with a plan, which I will see in the next 2 weeks, and then we'll bring it to the Overview and Scrutiny meeting in March. Does that sound okay? No comment. Councillor Lynch, anything to say about that? No. Okay. Anybody? I think that will if the addition of the neighbourhood areas plus the health scrutiny and the task group, I think that will be sufficient for the last meeting of this municipal year. So if unless anybody's got anything else they want to discuss on that night, if you do have anything you feel as though we should look at before March, please let me know, and we'll see whether we can get it on the agenda. But those will be the two main items on the agenda for the March meeting. Okay. Any comments on that? If not, 10 to 8. So thank you for your attendance this evening. I won't say safe journey home. Safe journey into the kitchen or the lounge, and enjoy a glass of something or other before the night's out. I'm going to do.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Right,
you.
thanks, John. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah,
Thank
Night,
you.
everybody.
Good night.